Welcome, guys. Welcome into the live. Now we are going to get through this as quickly as we can. We are going to be continuing with the reading of Tuesdays with Morrie. Oh boy! For those of you who have been here, as we have been reading this very, very inspirational book, will agree with me. Will agree with me that this is one of the best reads that we have had of all the books that we have been reading. This one is ranked among the best. And I want to say thanks to you all for coming in, for tuning in each time that we have come to read. Today we are going to be reading just about the few last chapters of the book. I don't want even for this book to end, but all good things must come to an end. This book, Tuesdays with Morrie. So come with me, guys, and let us read. Before we do that, I hope everybody is having a fabulous day. It is the 8th, it is the 6th of August, and it is Jamaica's Independence Day. And I hope everybody is celebrating and having a grand time. This morning, we had a great time over there on the talk. And so, and so now we are going to see how much time we can have here on YouTube as we read this book. All right, let us begin. Why can't I see it? Let us begin. Not far from here, on a hill, beneath a tree, overlooking a pond, very serene, a good place to think. Are you planning on thinking there? I'm planning on being dead there. He chuckles, I chuckle. Will you visit? Visit? Just come and talk. Make it a Tuesday. You always come on Tuesdays. We are Tuesday people, right? Tuesday people. Come to talk then. He had grown so weak, so fast. Look at me, he says. Wow, could everybody be prepared for death as Morrie is? I'm looking. You'll come to my grave, won't you? To tell me your problems? My problems? Yes. And you'll give me answers? I'll give you what I can. Don't I always? I picture his grave on the hill, overlooking the pond, some little 9-foot piece of earth where they will place him, cover him with dirt, put a stone on top, maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few days. I see myself sitting there alone, arms across my knees, staring into space. It won't be the same, I say, not being able to hear you talk. Oh, talk. He closes his eyes and smiles. Tell you what, after I'm dead, you talk. And I listen. Brother Zell, Uniquely Nika and AG. Hey, how are you all doing? Happy Sunday to you all. Hope you all are having a great day. We are here, we are reading a little bit more of the book Tuesdays with Morrie. Thank you all so much for coming, my friends. I appreciate you. The 13th Tuesday, we talk about the perfect day. Morrie wanted to be cremated. He had discussed it with Charlotte, and they decided it was the best way. The rabbi from Brandeis, Al Axelrod, a longtime friend whom they chose to conduct the funeral service, had come to visit Morrie, and Morrie told him of his cremation plans. And Al? Yes, make sure they don't overcook me. The rabbi was stunned, but Morrie was able to joke about his body now. The closer he got to the end, the more he saw it as a mere shell, a container of the soul. It was withering to useless skin and bones anyhow, which made it easier to let go. We are so afraid of the sight of death, Morrie told me when I sat down. I adjusted the microphone on his collar, but it kept flopping over. Morrie coughed. He was coughing all the time now. I read a book the other day. It said as soon as someone dies in a hospital, they pull the sheets up over their head and they wheel the body to some chute and push it down. They can't wait to get it out of their sight. People people act as if death is contagious. I fumbled with the microphone. Morrie nodded and said, "Yes, it is." He coughed again, and I moved back and waited, always braced for something, always braced for something serious. Morrie had been having bad nights lately, frightening nights. He could sleep only a few hours at a time before violent hacking spells would awake him. The nurses would come into the bedroom, pound him on the neck, try to bring up the poison. Even if they got him breathing normally again, well, normally, meaning with the help of the oxygen machine, the fight left him fatigued the whole next day. The oxygen tube was up his nose now. I hated the sight of it. To me, it symbolizes helplessness. I wanted to pull it out. Last night, Morrie said softly, yes, last night, I had a terrible spell. It went on for hours. I couldn't sleep. I started to get dizzy. And then I felt a certain peace. I felt that I was ready to go. His eyes widened. Mitch, it was the most incredible feeling. The sensation of accepting what was happening, being at peace. I was thinking about a dream I had last week where I was crossing a bridge into something unknown, being ready to move on to whatever is next. But you didn't. Morrie waited a moment. He shook his head slightly. No, I didn't. But I felt that I could. Do you understand? That's what we are all looking for, a certain peace with the idea of dying. If we know in the end that we can ultimately have that peace with dying, then we can finally do the really hard thing, which is make peace with living. He asked to see the hibiscus plant on the ledge behind him. I cupped it in my hand and held it up near his eyes. He smiled. It's natural to die, he said again. The fact that we make such a big hullabaloo over it is all because we don't see ourselves as part of nature. We think because we're humans, we are something above nature. He smiled at the plant. We are not. Everything that gets born dies. He looked at me. Do you accept that? Yes. All right then, he whispered. Now here's the payoff. Here is how we are different from those wonderful plants and animals. As long as we can love each other and remember the feeling of love we had, we can die without ever really going away. All the love you created is still there. All the memories are still there. You live on in the hearts of everyone you have touched and nurtured while you were here. His voice was raspy now, which usually meant he needed to stop for a while. I placed the plant back on the ledge and went to shut off the tape recorder. This is the last sentence Morrie got out before I did. Death ends a life, not a relationship. Hey Joe, what's up? How are you doing, my darling? Good to see you. I'm reading for a little bit here, just just two more pages before we end for today. There has been a development in the treatment of ALS, an experimental drug that was just gaining passage. It was not a cure, but a delay, a, a slowing of the decay of perhaps a few months. Morrie had heard about it, but he was too far gone. Besides, the medicine wouldn't be available for several more months. Not for me, Morrie said, dismissing it. In all the time he was sick, Morrie never held out hope he would be cured. He was realistic to a fault. One time, I asked if someone were to wave a magic wand and make him all better, would he become, in time, the man he had been before? He shook his head. No way I could go back. I am a different self now. I'm different in my attitudes. I'm different appreciating my body, which I didn't do fully before. I'm different in terms of trying to grapple with the big question, the ultimate question, the ones that won't go away. That's the thing, you see. Once you get your fingers on the important questions, you can't turn away from them. And which are the important questions, I may ask? As I see it, they have to do with love, responsibility, spirituality, awareness. And if I were healthy today, those would still be my issues. They should have been all along. I tried to imagine Morrie healthy. I tried to imagine him pulling the covers from his body, stepping from the chair, the two of us going for a walk around the neighborhood, the way we used to walk around campus. I suddenly realized it had been 16 years since I've seen him stand up. 16 years? What if you had one day perfectly healthy? I asked. What would you do? 24 hours? 24 hours. Let me see. I'd get up in the morning, do my exercises, have a lovely breakfast of sweet rolls and tea, go for a swim, then have my friends come over for a nice lunch. I'd have them come one or two at a time so we could talk about their families, their issues, talk about how much we need and mean to each other. Then I'd like to go for a walk in a garden with some trees, watch their colors, watch the birds, take in the nature that I haven't seen in so long now. In the evening, we'd all go together to a restaurant with some great pasta, maybe some duck. I love duck. And then we'd dance for the rest of the night. I'd dance with all the wonderful dance partners over there until I was exhausted. And then I'd go home and have a deep, wonderful sleep. That's it. Yeah, that's it. It was so simple, so average. I was actually a little disappointed. I figured he'd fly to Italy to have lunch with the president, or romp on the seashore, or try every exotic thing he could think of. After all these months, lying there, unable to move a leg or a foot, how could he find perfection in such an average day? Then I realized this was the whole point. Before I left that day, Morrie asked if he could bring up a topic. Your brother, he said. I felt a shiver. I do not know how Morrie knew this was on my mind. I had been trying to call my brother in Spain for weeks and had learned from a friend of his that he was flying back and forth to a hospital in Amsterdam. Mitch, I know it hurts when you can't be with someone you love, but you need to be at peace with his desires. Maybe he doesn't want you interrupting your life. Maybe he can't deal with that burden. I tell everyone I know to carry on with the life they know. Don't ruin it because I am dying. But he's my brother, I said. I know, Morrie. I know, but he's my brother. I know, Morrie said. That's why That's why it hurts. I saw Peter in my mind when he was 8 years old. His curly blonde hair puffed into a sweaty ball atop his head. I saw us wrestling in the yard next to our house, the grass stains soaking through the knees of our jeans. I saw him singing songs in front of the mirror, holding a brush as a microphone. And I saw us squeezing into the attic where we hid together as children, teasing our parents. And then I saw him as an adult who had drifted away, thin and frail, his face bony from the chemotherapy treatments. Morrie, I said, why doesn't he want to see me? My old professor sighed. There is no formula to relationships. They have to be negotiated in loving ways, with room for both parties. What they want and what they need, what they can do, and what their life is like. In business, people negotiate to win. They negotiate to get what they want. Maybe you are too used to that. Love is different. Love is when you are as concerned about someone else's situation as you are about your own. You have had these special times with your brother, and you no longer have what you had with him. You want them back. You never want them to stop. But that's part of being human. Stop, renew, stop, renew. I looked at him. I saw all the death in the world. I felt helpless. You'll find a way back to your brother, Morrie said. How do you know? Morrie smiled. You found me, didn't you? Irene, how are you doing? How are you doing? Thank you so much, Irene. Thank you so much, my love. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. We are reading this book called Tuesdays with Morrie, and we are close to the end of it, but I don't think we're going to end it today. It has just a little bit left. We have 15 minutes. Let's see how much we can get in 15 minutes. I heard a nice little story the other day, Morrie said. He closes his eyes for a moment, and I waited. Okay. The story is about a little wave bobbing along in the ocean, having a grand old time. He's enjoying the wind and the fresh air until he notices the other waves in front of him, crashing against the shore. My God, this is terrible, the wave says. Look what's going to happen to me. Then along comes another wave. It sees the first wave, looking grim, and it says to him, why do you look so sad? The first wave says, you don't understand. We are all going to crash. All of us waves are going to be nothing. Isn't that terrible? The second wave says, no, you don't understand. You are not a wave. You are part of the ocean. I smile. Morrie closes his eyes again. Part of the ocean, he says. Part of the ocean. I watch him breathe in and out. In and out. Wow. It's coming to the end of Morrie. And it feels like Morrie, to me, after I've been reading this book, it seems to me like the further I go into the book, I feel like I'm letting go of Morrie, just as his friend Mitch is letting go of him. It's almost like the book has absorbed me some. But let us continue. The 14th Tuesday, we say goodbye. It was cold and damp as I walked up the steps to Morrie's house. I took in little details, things I hadn't noticed for all the times I've visited. The cut of the hill, the stone facade of the house, The pachysandra plants, the low shrubs. I walked slowly, taking my time, stepping on dead wet leaves that flattened beneath my feet. Charlotte had called the day before to tell me Morrie was not doing well. This was her way of saying the final days have arrived. Morrie had cancelled all of his appointments and had been sleeping much of the time, which was unlike him. He never cared for sleeping, not when there were people he could talk with. He wants you to come visit, Charlotte said. But Mitch, yes, he's very weak. The porch steps, the glass in the front door. I absorbed these things in a slow, observant manner, as if seeing them for the very first time. I felt the tape recorder in the bag on my shoulder, and I unzipped it to make sure I had tapes. I don't know why. I always had tapes. Oh, you know why, Mitch. That's because you're always taping Morrie. Connie answered the bell. Normally buoyant, she had a drawn look on her face. Her hello was soft-spoken. How's he doing? I said. Well, not too good. She bit her lower lip. I don't like to think about it. He's such a sweet man, you know. I know. This is such a shame. Charlotte came down the hall and hugged me. She said that Morrie was still sleeping, even though it was 10 a.m. We went into the kitchen. I helped her straighten up, noticing all the bottles of pills lined up on the table. A small army of brown plastic soldiers with white caps. My old professor was taking morphine now to ease his breathing. I put the food I had brought with me into the refrigerator. Soup, vegetable cakes, tuna salad. I apologized to Charlotte for bringing it. Morrie hadn't chewed food like this in months. We both knew that, but it had become a small tradition. Sometimes when you're losing someone, you hang on to whatever tradition you can. I waited in the living room where Morrie and Ted Koppel had done their first interview. I read the newspaper that was lying on the table. 2 Minnesota children had shot each other playing with their father's gun. A baby had been found buried in a garbage can in an alley in Los Angeles. I put down the paper and stared into the empty fireplace. I tapped my shoe lightly on the hardwood floor. Eventually, I heard a door open and close, then Charlotte's footsteps coming towards me. All right, she said softly. He's ready for you. I rose and I turned towards our familiar spot, then saw a strange woman sitting at the end of the hall in a folding chair, her eyes on a book, her legs crossed. This was a hospice nurse, part of the 24-hour watch. Morrie's study was empty. I was confused. Then I turned back hesitantly to the bedroom, and there he was, lying in bed, under the sheet. I had seen him like this only one other time, when he was getting massaged, and the echo of his aphorism, "When you are in bed, you are dead," began anew inside my head. I entered, pushing a smile onto my face. He wore a yellow pajama-like top, and a blanket covered him from the chest down. The lump of his form was so withered that I almost thought there was something missing. He was like a small child now. Morrie's mouth was open, and his skin was pale and tight against his cheekbones. When his eyes rolled towards me, he tried to speak, but I heard only a soft grunt. "There he is," I said, mustering all the excitement I could find in my empty tail. He exhaled, shut his eyes, then smiled, the very effort seeming to make him tired. My dear friend," he finally said. "I am your friend," I said. I'm not so good today. Tomorrow will be better." He pushed out another breath and forced a nod. He was struggling with something beneath the sheets, and I realized he was trying to move his hands towards the opening. "Hold," he said. I pushed the covers down and grasped his fingers. They disappeared inside my own. I leaned in closer, a few inches from his face. It was the first time I'd seen him unshaven, the small white whiskers looking so out of place, as if someone had shaken salt neatly across his cheeks and chin. How could there be new life in his beard when it was draining everything else? Morrie, I said softly. Coach, he corrected. Coach, I said. I felt a shiver. He spoke in short bursts, inhaling air, exhaling words. His voice was thin and raspy. He smelt of ointments. You are a good soul. A good soul? Touch me, he whispered. He moved my hands to his heart. Here. It felt as if I had a pit in my throat. Oh, oh my gosh. What Joseph say? You sure you get some sleep, Trev? Me sleep, man. I slept, of course. Of course I slept. I slept from like, what, 12:30? Yeah, I slept from like 12:30 until about 45 minutes ago. Yeah, I slept. That was enough. Yeah, now I'm gonna get me a very, very cold shower and then I'll be good. Ah, I don't know how to say goodbye. He patted my hand weakly, keeping it on his chest. This is how we say goodbye. He breathed softly in and out. I could feel his ribcage rise and fall. Then he looked right at me. Love you, he rasped. I love you too, Coach. No, you do. No, something else. What else do you know? You always have. His eyes got small, and then he cried, his face contorted like a baby who hadn't figured out how his tear ducts worked. I held him close for several minutes. I rubbed his loose skin. I stroked his hair. I put a palm against his face and felt the bones close to the flesh and the tiny wet tears as if squeezed from a dropper. When his breathing approached normal again, I cleared my throat and said I knew he was tired, so I would be back next Tuesday, and I expected him to be a little more alert. He snorted lightly, as close as he could come to a laugh. It was a sad sound just the same. I picked up the unopened bag with the tape recorder. When had I even brought this? I knew we would never use it. I leaned in and kissed him closely, my face against his. Whiskers on whiskers, chin on chin, holding it there longer than normal in case it gave him even a split second of pleasure. Okay then, I said, pulling away. I blinked back the tears, and he smacked his lips together and raised his eyebrows at the sight of my face. I like to think it was a fleeting moment of satisfaction for my dear old professor. He had finally made me cry. Okay then, he whispered. Graduation. I did, Joseph. Graduation. Morrie died on a Saturday morning. His immediate family was with him in the house. Rob made it in from Tokyo. He got to kiss his father goodbye, and John was there, and of course, Charlotte was there, and Charlotte's cousin Marcia, who had written the poem that so moved Morrie at his unofficial memorial service, the poem that likened him to a tender sequoia. They slept in ships around his bed. Morrie had fallen into a coma 2 days after our final visit, and the doctor said he could go at any moment. Instead, he hung on through a tough afternoon, through a dark night. Finally, on the 4th of November, when those he loved had left the room just for a moment to grab coffee in the kitchen, The first time none of them were with him since the coma began. Morrie stopped breathing, and he was gone. I believe he died this way on purpose. I believe he wanted no chilling moments, no one to witness his last breath and be haunted by it, the way he had been haunted by his mother's death notice telegram or by his father's corpse in the city morgue. I believe he knew that he was in his own bed, that his books and his notes and his small hibiscus plant were nearby. He wanted to go serenely, and that is how he went. The funeral was held on a damp, windy morning. The grass was wet, and the sky was the color of milk. We stood by the hole in the earth, oh my God, close enough to hear the pond water lapping against the edge and to see ducks shaking off their feathers. Although hundreds of people had wanted to attend, Charlotte kept this gathering very small, just a few close friends and relatives. Rabbi Axelrod read a few poems. Morrie's brother David, who still walked with a limp from his childhood polio, lifted the shovel and tossed dirt in the grave, as per tradition. At one point, when Morrie's ashes were placed into the ground, I glanced around the cemetery. Morrie was right. It was indeed a lovely spot. Trees and grass and a sloping hill. You talk? I listen, he had said. I tried doing this in my head, and to my happiness, found that the imagined conversation felt almost natural. I looked down at my hands, saw my watch, and realized why. It was Tuesday. Oh, so here Morrie was being buried on a Tuesday. This was indeed their final Tuesday together. My father moved through days of we. Through days of we? My father moved through days, that is THEYS, of we, WE, singing each new leaf out of each tree. And every child was sure that spring danced when she heard my father sing. That was a song read at Morrie's funeral. Boy, and I must read the conclusion here, guys. I must read it. I look back sometimes at the person I was before I rediscovered my old professor. I want to talk to that person. I want to tell him what to look out for, what mistakes to avoid. I want to tell him to be more open, to ignore the lure of advertised values, to pay attention when your loved ones are speaking, as if it were the last time you might hear them. Mostly, I want to tell that person to get on an airplane and visit a gentle old man in West Newton, Massachusetts, sooner rather than later, before that old man gets sick and loses his ability to dance. I know I cannot do this. None of us can undo what we have done or relive a life already recorded. But if Professor Morrie Schwartz taught me anything at all, it was this: there is no such thing as too late in life. He was changing until the day he said goodbye. Not long after Morrie's death, I reached my brother in Spain. We had a long talk. I told him I respected his distance and that all I wanted was to be in touch, in the present, not just the past, to hold him in my life as much as he could let me. You are my only brother, I said. I don't want to lose you. I love you. I had never said such a thing to him before. A few days later, I received a message on my fax machine. It was typed in a sprawling, poorly punctuated, all-cap letters fashion that always characterized my brother's words. Hi, have joined the 90s, it began. He wrote a few little stories that he had been doing that week, a couple of jokes. At the end, he signed off like this: I have heartburn and diarrhea at this moment. Life's a bitch. Chat later. Signed, Sore Tush. I laughed until there were tears in my eyes. The book was largely Morrie's idea. He called it our final thesis. Like the best of work projects, it brought us closer together, and Morrie was delighted when several publishers expressed interest, even though he died before meeting any of them. The advance money helped pay Morrie's enormous medical bills, and for that, we were both grateful. The title, by the way, we came up with one day in Morrie's office. He liked naming things. He had several ideas, but when I said, "How about Tuesdays with Morrie?" he smiled in an almost blushing way, and I knew that was it. After Morrie died, I went through boxes of old college material and I discovered a final paper I had written for one of his classes. It was 20 years old now. On the front page were my penciled comments scribbled to Morrie, and beneath them were his comments scribbled back. Mine began, "Dear coach," his began, "Dear player." For some reason, each time I read that, I miss him more and more. Have you ever really had a teacher? One who saw you as a raw but precious thing, a jewel that, with wisdom, could be polished to a proud shine? If you are lucky enough to find your way to such teachers, you will always find your way back. Sometimes it is only in your head. Sometimes it is right alongside their beds. The last class of my old professor's life took place once a week in his home by a window in his study where he could watch a small hibiscus plant shed its pink flowers. The class met the class met on Tuesdays. No books were required. The subject was the meaning of life. It was taught from experience. The teaching goes on. Ah! Here ends the book, Tuesdays with Morrie. Guys, this was a fabulous, a wonderful book. And I hope that we learned something from this book. This book has taught us to appreciate love, life, people, and the experiences we have with them. There is no need worrying about dying because it's going to come no matter what. So while we are alive, let's just live and let live. That is going to be it from me for today, my friends. Thank you all so much for coming. Michibu, Irene, Joseph, AG, Bridazel, and the others. Thank you all. Uniquely, Nico. Thank you so much for coming, my friends. That's going to be it from me for now. Until the next time. This is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. Have yourselves a great afternoon, everybody.